in the end, I feel like it was not my best work. Hey everyone, Bowerdad here, and welcome to Why Did I Lose, the video series where I honestly review my ranked game losses in order to find better lines of play, improve my decision-making process, and hopefully inspire others to do the same. Now, I have a pretty decent lead here, I feel. I was just talking about my Salt Lake City play where my opponent led Grimmsnarl 2 games in a row, and Fake Out Behemoth Blade KO'd it 2 games in a row. I'm going for this play again on ladder. However, my opponent is a little bit wiser to that strategy and decides to swap out to their own Urshifu instead. So this Fake Out Behemoth Blade is going to deal some damage to Urshifu, but of course not enough to KO it, and it leaves my opponent's Groudon to do something for free, which in this case is going to be Precipice Blades. In spite of the berry, in spite of the -1, this Precipice Blades still does a ton of damage, I decide that due to the typing we have here, I'm going to swap out my Incineroar for Palkia and start perhaps getting set up. And I actually time out with my Zacian. I thought I had 10 seconds left instead of 0 seconds. So my Zacian is going to do something, or at least I thought. It's at this moment we realize that the Urshifu is actually Choice Scarf. So this Fire Punch comes in, and Zacian was not going to get to do anything anyway unless I had protected, which I wasn't planning on. And then even at -1, Precipice Blades still does entirely too much damage to my Palkia. So I do take a bruising, but I get Landorus in order to further mitigate this attack power. Now, I decide the real threat here to my Palkia is the Dialga that my opponent most certainly has in the back. So I'm going to Dynamax and get as many of those special defense boosts from Max Quake as humanly possible while I use my other slot to pivot. You'll see Landorus is going to U-turn here into the Groudon, now Grimmsnarl slot. Palkia's going to Dynamax. And since my Landorus is also Scarfed, I'm going to get in first with my U-turn off of Grimmsnarl. And I'm going to bring in back, I believe it's Incineroar. Yes, my Incineroar comes back in. Now, it is this moment when I was playing the game live where I actually realized that my opponent is Scarf Urshifu, because it went before, it went right after the Landorus. Max Quake comes in, almost enough to take out Grimm. At this point in the game, I unfortunately overread the situation. It's very obvious to me, and I'm thinking to my opponent, that my Fake Out into their Grimmsnarl is basically a free KO. So I decide that I'm going to spend Palkia's turn attacking Urshifu, and that I will do a Flare Blitz on the Grimmsnarl in order to catch a hopeful switch in. However, it doesn't work out that way. Grimmsnarl gets Light Screen up, which ends up being relatively significant to how the rest of the game goes. Urshifu will get KO'd by this Wyrmwind here, and then Incineroar will wrap it up with the Flare Blitz. And this will call in my opponent's last 2 Pokemon, Dialga and Groudon, but notably, they still have their Dynamax at their disposal. I did not recognize it at the time, but I'm not in a super position to win this endgame. I am up on Pokemon count, but all 3 of mine are injured. I go for the super effective Max Quake into Dialga, and I decide to swap out for Landorus so that I can start putting on Earthquake pressure. I think this was not the right call, which I'll explain here in a moment, but Landorus will Intimidate. And of course, my opponent is going to Dynamax their Dialga in order to neutralize my Palkia. I am going to go first. I am going to get another special defense boost onto my Palkia. I honestly thought that might help me survive what was coming. Unfortunately, it did not. Groudon misses Precipice Blades again onto both of my Pokemon. This Wyrmwind still KOs, which I did not expect, and effectively seals my fate. There is still a little bit more that happens during this game, but at this point it is super over. Landorus is -1 attack. I'm locked into Earthquake thanks to my, I'm not locked into Earthquake yet, but I will be locking myself into Earthquake because it is the only remotely close option I have in order to grant success. Incineroar will attempt to fake out before going down. The Earthquake unfortunately does not a lot of damage. Definitely not enough to bring this back. Groudon will skip their turn, and then Landorus gets one hit KO'd by the next Wyrmwind. So that effectively locks up the game for me. It looks like the path to victory was a pretty tight one. However, there are a couple of things that I do want to cover that I think make the game a lot more winnable. I'm, of course, first going to start with the turn right after I had done Max Quake off of my opponent's Grimmsnarl and U-turned into my Incineroar. It's the first turn Incineroar is in play, and so there is fake out pressure to be had against the Grimmsnarl. I incorrectly assumed that my opponent would try to bail Grimmsnarl out of that situation. However, something that I didn't consider with this is my opponent's two options for the swap in are Dialga and Groudon. And having either of those Pokemon take damage as opposed to just sacrificing the Grimmsnarl would have been a super awful idea on my opponent's part. And even if I did want to cover for that switch, I had a much better option to do so. The correct play is to fake out the Grimmsnarl anyway and to Max Quake into that same slot. If they do get a switch, I'm going to heavily damage the switch in, and if they don't switch in, Grimmsnarl will still get KO'd, and the attack is going to go then hit the Urshifu anyway. As a note, it should have definitely been Max Quake instead of Max Wyrmwind. The special defense boost would have been more valuable. Secondly, on the turn right after that, my opponent has their fresh Dialga, their fresh Groudon in here. We know that they are more than likely going to Dynamax their Dialga in order to take care of my Palkia. I feel like a big attack into Palkia is all but guaranteed. I should have spent that turn doing Max Guard in order to be in a better position. Hard swapping into Landorus was also a mistake because the risk to get damage onto Landorus was really, really bad. I also, even though I didn't get attacked directly, I suffered an attack drop on that Landorus, which really compromised my late game even further than it already was. Finally, there was a portion of the game where I decided it was go time to Dynamax Palkia and start getting as many Quake boosts as humanly possible in order to prepare for that late game Dialga. When I made that decision, I was actually, with my Palkia, sitting right next to a Pokemon that also had the option to Dynamax, do Quake boosts, but was stronger and also had the stab on their ground type moves. I think it would have been much wiser actually to Dynamax Landorus this game instead of Palkia. Things were looking pretty grim in that end game. However, I think with all of these adjustments to consider, I could have perhaps made the game a lot closer, even a victory for myself. And that's why I lost. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in some more of my content, I have a couple of more videos that I think you might like right here. That's my time. Have a fantastic rest of your week.